Have you ever fallen in love so deeply that you forgot who you were? Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt like you had finally come home, only to be left feeling more lost than ever? We call it love. But what if it's not? What if the reason you can't fall in love for real is because you were never meant to love them in the first place? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Maybe what you call love is just your unconscious trying to find something it lost a long time ago. Close your eyes for a second. Picture this. It's late. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Your phone lights up, but it's not them. It hasn't been for weeks. You tell yourself you're fine, that you've moved on, but then the memory hits you out of nowhere. The way they said your name, the way it felt like they saw something in you. No one else ever did. And yet, they left. Why? Why do the ones you fall for never stay? Why does it feel like the deeper you love, the more invisible you become? The truth is hard to hear, but you deserve to know it. You weren't falling in love, you were falling into a pattern. And this pattern didn't start with them. It started much earlier, maybe even before you had words for it. Carl Jung had a name for this. A hidden force within us that shapes how we love, who we crave, and why we repeat the same emotional wounds again and again. He called it the Animus. And once you understand what the Animus really is, everything will begin to make sense. Because here's the part no one tells you. You don't love them. You love what they reflect back to you. You love the piece of yourself you never got to fully hold, now projected onto someone who barely understands the weight they carry in your life. That's why it hurts. That's why it never lasts. Because it was never about them. It was about the part of you still trying to be seen, still trying to be loved. So, if you've ever felt like love always ends in confusion, in silence, in absence, stay with me, because what Jung discovered might not just explain your heartbreak. It might change the way you love forever. To understand why love feels so mysterious, so beautiful yet so painful, we have to step into the world of Carl Jung. Jung was not just a psychologist, he was a cartographer of the human soul. While others looked at the mind as a machine to be fixed, Jung saw it as a deep, symbolic landscape where every feeling, every fear, every attraction had meaning rooted in the unconscious. One of his most profound ideas was that inside every person exists both masculine and feminine energies, not just as social roles or biology, but as archetypal forces, timeless, invisible patterns shaping our inner lives. In women, Jung called this inner masculine the Animus. In men, the inner feminine is called the Anima. They are not traits, they are not behaviors. They are the soul's blueprint for how we relate, how we desire, and most importantly, how we project what we do not yet recognize in ourselves. Let me explain. When you meet someone and feel that instant pull, that magnetic, almost spiritual connection, you might believe it's destiny. You might call it chemistry. But Jung would say, you're not just seeing them. You're seeing your animus. You're seeing the part of yourself you've never met, never integrated, but always longed for. For a woman, the animus might appear in dreams as a mysterious stranger, a wise guide, or even a cold, distant man who seems unreachable. In waking life, this often translates into falling for emotionally unavailable men. Men who carry the illusion of strength or depth, but who withhold affection or truth. Why? Because they embody a part of her own psyche she has not yet understood. She doesn't love the man. She loves what he symbolizes. He is her unclaimed voice, her unspoken courage, her inner power. But until she makes this animus conscious, she will keep seeking him in others, projecting her deepest needs onto real people who were never meant to carry them. And that is the tragedy Jung warns us about. What we do not face in ourselves, we chase in others. We confuse familiarity with fate. We mistake unresolved inner tension for love. So what does this mean for relationships? It means the very thing drawing you towards someone might not be about them at all. It might be a reflection, a mirror held up by your unconscious, showing you what you most need to see inside yourself. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, But that acceptance does not happen through another person. It begins when you realize that love is not just a feeling. It is a process of recognition, a revelation, a confrontation with your own hidden depths. And until you meet your animus, you will confuse desire with destiny. You will call longing love. You will call chaos passion. And worst of all, you will continue to repeat the same patterns because the unconscious does not forget. It simply waits patiently, quietly, until you are ready to listen. So as we move forward, I want you to hold one question close. What if the person you could never get over was never about them at all? What if they were the key to something far more important, your own unfinished story? Because that is where we are going next. Into the patterns, into the projection, into the quiet force that chooses for us when we are not yet ready to choose for ourselves. Let me tell you a story. She was smart, independent, the kind of woman who read books about self-growth and healing. She told herself she knew better this time, that she would recognize the red flags, that she would never chase love again. But then, he walked in. He was calm, mysterious, emotionally detached in a way that felt oddly familiar. He didn't say much, but when he did, it felt like he saw right through her, like he understood the parts of her that no one else ever tried to reach. And just like that, she was hooked. Not because he loved her, not because he offered security, clarity, or honesty, but because something about him awakened a longing she couldn't explain, a hunger that had nothing to do with him, and everything to do with something missing inside her. She started waiting for his texts, replaying their conversations, rationalizing his absence, making excuses for his silence. Every time he withdrew, she blamed herself. Maybe she was too much. Maybe she needed to be more patient, more chill, less emotional. And deep down, something whispered, if you just do this right, he'll finally choose you. But he never did. Still, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because this cycle felt hauntingly familiar, like something she had known long before she met him. Carl Jung would say she wasn't in love with the man. She was in a relationship with her own animus, projected onto a person who couldn't hold it. This is what projection feels like. It's not just romantic. It's addictive. You're not drawn to them because of who they are. You're drawn to the part of yourself you see in them, the part you have been exiled from, the part you forgot how to reclaim. In this case, her animus wasn't a healthy, integrated masculine. It wasn't the wise, protective, empowering inner voice. It was the wounded, distorted, shadow version, the cold father, the unavailable presence, the silent judge. So, of course, she kept falling for men who mirrored that same energy, distant, emotionally numb, elusive, because her unconscious wasn't seeking love. It was seeking closure. Closure from a pattern that began in childhood, when she first learned that love meant waiting. That attention had to be earned, that being chosen was a prize she had to work for. She wasn't chasing a man, she was chasing a ghost. And this ghost had many faces over the years, different names, different stories, but the same emotional blueprint. And each time, it ended the same way. Confusion, pain, emptiness. So she went back to the books, the journals, the affirmations, but nothing changed. Because knowledge isn't enough when the wound is unconscious. That's the thing about patterns. You don't just break them with logic. You break them with awareness. You have to see them, feel them, name them. Only then can you begin to choose differently. But how do you recognize projection when you're inside it? The answer is not easy, but it is simple. Notice how you feel when you're with them. Are you at peace, or are you in pursuit? Do you feel like you can breathe, or are you always trying to earn their next moment of attention? Are you loving from fullness, or from fear? The animus, when unconscious, does not guide us toward love. It leads us into obsession, into fantasy, into cycles that mimic love but are rooted in unmet needs and forgotten pain. And unless you see it, you will keep walking in circles. Different faces, same feeling. Jung believed that every relationship is a mirror, but not all mirrors reflect truth. Some reflect the illusions we carry inside us, the stories we never questioned, the versions of love we were taught too young, before we had the strength to ask, is this real, or is this just familiar? So, if you have ever looked at someone and felt like your whole world depended on their validation, if you have ever stayed when you knew you should leave, not because of love, but because of fear, then maybe it's time to ask yourself the hardest question. Is this about them, or is this about you? Because the answer might change everything. Let's go deeper. To understand why these patterns feel so unbreakable, we need to talk about projection, not as a surface-level behavior, but as a core psychological mechanism. According to Carl Jung, projection happens when you unconsciously place your own internal content, your fears, desires, wounds, or unlived quality onto another person. In other words, you're not seeing them. You're seeing a part of yourself, disowned and disoriented, now walking around in someone else's body. It's not your fault. Projection is a survival instinct. It helps us navigate the unknown. But when left unchecked, it becomes the lens through which we see the world, especially in love. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But it's not just about irritation. The same mechanism works with attraction. What captivates you in someone else is often a mirror reflecting something dormant in you. Let's say you're drawn to someone's confidence, their stillness, their edge. You might believe it's about chemistry or compatibility, but maybe it's about the confidence you've never allowed yourself to feel. Maybe it's about the voice inside you that was silenced long ago, the part that says, "I deserve more," but was never heard. Now, let's bring in the shadow. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is everything you deny, repress, or refuse to see in yourself. It can be dark traits like anger, jealousy, or neediness, but it also includes light, your brilliance, your voice, your power that was shut down because it felt unsafe to express. And here's where it gets dangerous. When the shadow is ignored, it doesn't disappear, it hides. And the more you deny it, the more power it gains. Until one day, it shows up in someone else, someone you fall for, someone who carries both your light and your darkness, and becomes irresistible because you don't just want them, you want you. The you that you lost, the you that was never allowed to be. So when they leave, or disappoint you, or fail to meet your fantasy, it feels like a death, not just of the relationship, but of the part of you that finally felt alive through them. That's why heartbreak hurts so much more than it should. It's not just about losing a person. It's about losing the illusion of wholeness they gave you. You projected your shadow onto them, hoping they could carry it for you, hoping they could complete a story you never finished. But they can't. No one can. And until you retrieve that shadow, until you bring it back into your own awareness, you will keep searching for it in others. This is what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So what does this look like in real life? It looks like asking, why do I feel so small around them? Why do I crave their attention more than my own peace? Why do I give so much, even when nothing comes back? The answers are rarely about the other person. They're about your shadow. They're about the parts of you that never got the space to exist, now begging for attention through someone else. Here's the truth. You can't heal projection by changing partners. You can't silence the shadow by avoiding it. The only way out is in. You have to meet your shadow, sit with it, listen to it, and more importantly, forgive it. Because your shadow is not your enemy. It's your echo, your forgotten self, the version of you that survived when no one else was watching. And when you integrate it, when you stop projecting it onto others, you begin to see people for who they really are, not for who you need them to be. That's when love becomes possible, not as fantasy, but as truth. Because only when you stop chasing your reflection can you truly connect with someone else. So ask yourself, what have I been projecting? And what part of me have I been waiting for someone else to carry? Because maybe, just maybe, that part is the most important one you've ever lost. And now, it's time to bring it home. Here is the moment where everything begins to shift. It's the realization that what you called love was never really love. Not in the way you thought. You didn't fall for them. You fell for the part of yourself that you saw in them. The part you were missing. The part you had buried so deep, you could only recognize it when it appeared in someone else. That's why it felt like magic. That's why it felt like fate. Because when your animus or anima awakens inside of you through projection, the feeling is overwhelming. It's like finally meeting someone who completes a sentence you didn't know you were trying to say. But that sentence was yours all along. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious will continue to control your life until you bring it into awareness. That means the people you are most drawn to, the ones who trigger you, who shake you, who leave you questioning everything, are often not there to stay. They are there to reveal the forgotten self, the hidden truth, the longing you thought was about connection, but was actually about reunion with you. You were not just looking for a partner, you were looking for the missing piece of your own soul. And here's where it gets even harder. When you chase someone to feel whole, you are not loving them. You are using them as a mirror, a placeholder for a part of you that you have not yet reclaimed. That's not love. That's compensation. That's the unconscious trying to finish an old story through a new character. And that story always ends the same way. Disappointment, withdrawal, abandonment, because no one else can carry your animus for you. No one can hold your unclaimed voice, your forgotten power, your unmet need and still love you fully. It's too heavy. It's not theirs to hold. This is the point of rupture, the collapse of the illusion. And it hurts. It really hurts. But within that collapse is a doorway, a sacred invitation, because now you see it. You see that your love was never lost. It was misplaced. You weren't asking to be loved. You were asking to be seen by yourself. So what happens when you stop chasing the reflection? What happens when you turn inward? Not to escape, but to recover. You begin to feel something different. Not the rush, not the longing, but presence, calm, wholeness. That is the beginning of true love. Not with someone else, with yourself. And from that place, everything changes. Because now, when you meet someone, you're not trying to fill a hole. You're sharing a fullness. You're not hoping they'll save you. You're inviting them to walk with you. That's what Jung meant by individuation. Becoming whole, not through another person, but through the sacred work of reclaiming every part of you that you once gave away. And that, right there, is the turning point. The moment when the pattern breaks. The moment when you no longer confuse projection with love, and you finally understand, you were never broken. You were just waiting to remember who you are. This is where healing begins. Not in forgetting, not in moving on, but in turning inward with honesty and courage to meet the part of you that was never truly broken, just unheard. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It is not self-improvement, it is self-reunion. It is the sacred journey of becoming whole by integrating everything you once denied, abandoned, or projected onto someone else. And it begins in quiet moments. Moments when you no longer chase love, but ask instead, what part of me is still waiting to be loved by me? You stop seeing relationships as rescue missions. You stop believing someone out there will finally fix the ache. And instead, you begin to listen to your patterns, your pain, your unmet needs, not as enemies, but as messages, clues from the unconscious, pointing you back home. The animus, when integrated, no longer hijacks your relationships. It becomes a guide, a source of clarity, strength, and discernment. You begin to recognize what is real and what is projection. You stop confusing emotional intensity with emotional safety, and most importantly, you begin to choose differently. You choose peace over chaos, wholeness over validation, truth over fantasy. You begin to say no, not out of fear, but from self-respect. You stop giving parts of yourself away just to feel worthy. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. That is not arrogance. That is sovereignty. Because the animus in its healthy form empowers you. It connects you to your inner authority, the voice that says, "I know who I am, even if you don't choose me. I am enough, even if you walk away." From that space, love becomes something else entirely. It is no longer a desperate reach. It becomes a sacred offering. You love not to fill a hole, but to overflow, not to be completed, but to share your completeness. This changes everything. You stop falling for the same emotional patterns because you're no longer unconsciously chasing them. You see them for what they are, echoes of the past. You feel the pull, yes, but now you have the power to pause, to ask, is this love, or is this familiar pain wearing a different face? You become intimate with yourself in a way that no partner ever could replace. You stop searching for home in someone else because you've built it within. And from there, something beautiful happens. You become magnetic not because you're performing, but because you are grounded, present, alive in your own truth. People will feel it. Some may be drawn to it, others may resist it, but it doesn't matter, because you're no longer here to be consumed. You're here to be known. That is the power of inner union. When your conscious mind and unconscious heart finally meet, not in conflict, but in harmony. When you stop outsourcing your healing to others and start becoming the healer you were waiting for, individuation is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a lifelong unfolding. But with every layer you reclaim, with every projection you take back, with every part of yourself you welcome home, you become more whole, more true, more capable of love that is no longer bound by fantasy or fear. This is not the end of your love story. This is the first time it is truly yours. Take a deep breath. Let everything you've heard so far settle not just in your mind, but in your body. This isn't just information. It's an invitation. An invitation to look inward, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, quietly and honestly, what have I been calling love? Was it connection, or was it a craving? Was it presence, or was it projection? Did I love them, or did I love who I became when I was near them? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. Because without reflection, there is no transformation. We stay stuck in loops, convinced we are unlucky in love, when the truth is we are unconscious in love. So look back not with shame, but with openness. Who have you loved that was never truly yours? Who have you waited for, even after they walked away? Who hurt you, not because they were cruel, but because they carried the shape of your unhealed story? We all have one, a story, a wound, a moment where something essential inside us was left unseen, unfelt, unheard. And in that absence, we began to search, not for people, but for pieces of ourselves we thought were gone. Jung understood this. He knew that relationships are not just emotional experiences, they are psychological mirrors. And sometimes, the most intense connections are not signs of fate, but signs of unfinished inner work. This is not meant to make you cynical, it's meant to make you conscious. Because once you see the pattern, you can change it. Once you recognize the projection, you can take it back. And once you meet your Animus not as a fantasy in someone else, but as a living force within you, begin to love from a place that is not desperate, but divine. So ask yourself one last question. If I stopped searching for love in others and started remembering it in myself, what would change? How would I show up? Who would I stop chasing? Who would I finally become? This isn't about letting go of love. It's about finally making room for the kind that is real, the kind that doesn't leave you empty, the kind that doesn't demand you disappear to be wanted. You are not too much. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are simply being called back to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's where love always begins. Maybe the reason love has felt so heavy is because you've been carrying more than just your heart. You've been carrying your shadow, your childhood, your longing, your silence. And now you know, you don't need to chase love. You don't need to earn it. You only need to remember who you are beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the stories you've been told, and the ones you've kept telling yourself. Carl Jung didn't promise peace. He offered something more powerful: truth. And truth doesn't always soothe. Sometimes it breaks. But in that breaking, you begin again. So if this spoke to something in you, if it stirred a part you've forgotten or maybe never dared to touch, let it stay with you. Let it whisper through your next choice, your next pause, your next breath. And if you're ready to stop repeating and start remembering, subscribe for more. Not for me, but for the version of you who's been waiting for this moment. Your love story isn't over. It's just starting to become real.